Afghanistan, the graveyard of empires, and also home to the figures which we'll be reviewing in today's Perry Miniatures unboxing. Now with all these unboxings I always start by looking at the artwork on the front. It's usually by Peter Dennis. Whether you get Perry Miniatures or Wargames Atlantic, it's usually Peter Dennis. And this set offers loads of possibilities, from swordsmen to knife-wielding fanatics, Jezzails to captured British weapons. I think if we're going to attract newcomers into the hobby, it's only going to be happening through box sets like this. You can, as soon as you pick up the box, there's loads of information here, and it's really intriguing. I couldn't wait to get these home and open them. Now, as the box opens, we're going to have a look at the contents inside. Straight away we see we've got 4 sprues, each containing 8 regular tribesmen, or perhaps irregular tribesmen that should be, and 2 command sprues, each with 2 command figures on it. And we'll put these aside to talk about in a second. Now, as always, I love the fact that the Perry Miniatures box sets include flags and also include this kind of little bit of information, a little bit of detail about where you can find more details, and also about the scenarios and actions these can be used for. There's a map, gives us good regional and geographic context. And now, if Alan and Michael ever watch any of these videos, please do this again. Numbered sprue diagrams, so you can see how the parts fit together, which arm goes to which body, and in the case of paired left and right arms, how to put them together to get the best fit without gaps. I was a big fan of this leaflet. You can't really call it a leaflet, it's got staples in it. It's a small booklet. Again, loads of information here, loads of details, and it kind of explains how to put the figure together to get the best possible results. And let's move on to looking at the contents of the booklet. Again, this was written by Mark Urban, so a fairly high profile writer in terms of British military history. And there's quite a lot of details in here, details about the clothing and the garments being depicted. So this is really a good source of inspiration for someone who doesn't know a lot about the subject and doesn't want to dive into lots of heavy reference materials. Now, I've mentioned this before, and I'll mention it again for the sake of this video. The bases included in Perry Miniatures boxes. Yes, I like the fact they include bases, but I don't know what they're thinking with these sizings. These really are no use to I think anyone. I don't know anyone that uses the native boxes as they come. Now let's look at the sprues. We'll start off by looking at the warriors. Now there are 8 figures on this sprue. 2 of them will be kneeling, and one of them has this strange running pose. I'll talk more about him in a minute. There's a great range of heads, more heads than bodies, and there's enough arms to go around for everyone to either be armed with a musket or Jezzail, or armed with a sword and shield. And as well as swords and shields, there's also knives, so if you want to get that two-handed double weapon look, this is the way to do it. Now let's flip that over and have a look at some of the details on here. These are really stunning. Some of the finest work the Perry Miniatures team have put together to date, I think. Not quite sure with the Jezzails what exactly the purpose is here, because there's no open hands that could hold a weapon. And it'd be quite a difficult thing to convert some of these Snyder rifles to be holding those weapons, and there's no way you could sort of mount them on the back and make it look realistic. So not quite sure what those 3 weapons are for. Moving back, the command sprue is fantastic. I really like this flintlock pistol, which one of the commanders could be wielding. Shame there isn't a revolver option here as well, but I think the flintlock really sort of sells these figures. Now I'm planning to use some of these for a Congo faction, and use some of them beyond the context of Northwest Frontier. So some of these will be used in a kind of generic Oriental style, and I use that choice of word quite carefully when talking about colonial figures. Now this figure, not great. There's a big gap in his leg. But if I make up a generic swordsman, we'll have a look and see what he looks like. And yeah, straight out of the box, straight off the sprue, this is what you get. I haven't bothered to trim up much of the mould lines, but there isn't a great deal of flash. And then straight on to spraying. again, these figures have that sort of, they have definite variety of of purpose. Yes, they've been well researched and well detailed for the Northwest frontier, but some of these figures, I mean, I could always use them as like Qing Dynasty Chinese, or some of the kind of Algerian, Moroccan troops in the Congo, and a huge range of other applications beyond the Northwest frontier itself. This figure here, I love the characterness fullness of this figure. Crouching amongst the rocks, he sort of takes a bead on an oblivious foreign patrol, perhaps. The second lucky bonus content is a little unbagging section. So in this bag, you'll find, I found the contents of 2 Wargames Atlantic sprues. Now, I'm not doing a side-by-side comparison because there really is no comparison. I'll explain, but basically the Wargames Atlantic figures, the value for money just simply isn't there. £25 for a box compared to RRP of £20, but available cheaper elsewhere for Perry's. The numbers, 40 compared to 25, and I'm afraid the quality isn't there for the increased price per model. But I do like the fact they include Martini Henrys, suspiciously absent from the Perry Miniatures set. And you get 1 loose weapon and 1 in a hand per sprue. As I just find those out and present to the camera. Now, there are some nice features about these figures, and I have intentions to use them in a range of settings, just not necessarily in the setting which they're intended for. So I actually intend to do some heavy conversion work on these, perhaps just some milliput. And as I mentioned earlier about Qing China, I actually intend to use these as very much Southeast Asian figures, as they don't have that much that really ties them to a Northwest frontier setting. So actually they don't have so much that ties them to Afghanistan, or sort of a Pashtun, or kind of Persian, or north kind of that sort of general area of northwestern India. That they sort of have a generic fantasy vibe almost. They've got more of a sort of Persia 40 Thieves, typified, I think, by this punch dagger. Now, this is a quite a Mughal weapon, the punch dagger, and I've no doubt that they did exist in Afghanistan, but it just sort of says a little bit more about the kind of the design statement, I think, perhaps behind the Wargames Atlantic figures. I've put one together just for this video, and yeah, I think we can demonstrate that the posing isn't as good. There's a weird lean to this pose. The detailing on the weapons, so that knife, for example, it's got more like a Bowie knife than the Ghazi knives depicted on the sprue. And the Jezzail just doesn't quite look as... it just doesn't look quite like the Perry one. I'm going to compare it now. The other thing you notice is the Wargames Atlantic figures, although in general very good, in this instance much shorter, and they have quite a strange flatness to them. It's hard to explain when you can't see them in 3D, but they look they've got very wide, flat shoulders that don't sort of look like naturalistic poses. Now, this is up first, some painted figures in one of my unboxings. I made these two for use in a Frostgrave warband, but underneath it, they are actually, as you can see, mostly from the Afghan set, just a change of arms and one head change. I think these characters have got really loads of life and detail to them, and you don't have to use them in just colonial settings, you can use them in fantasy settings as well. This is another little trait for the end of the video. You'll notice this is the British Northwestern frontier troops, so the Sudan British almost, and here with a few parts from the Zulu Wars kit for the arms, as I wanted to give them some frogging on their cuffs, and then from the Afghan Tribesmen I've created a unit of British Indian troops, so not sepoys at this point, the British Army of India, but I really think that for colonial gaming, British players really can't underestimate the value of adding the Army of India. They contributed huge amounts of manpower and kind of appeared on most theatres, but they're not well represented at the moment. So hopefully this will slightly redress the balance. as the